All right, we're going to talk today on the Garlic Marketing Show about growing a membership site and selling courses with the absolute master, Micah Mitchell from Memberium. Micah, say hi.
Yeah, man, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
And we're going to talk about the 4 stages of growing membership to 1,000 plus users. And actually, you'll never believe the number that his number one user has is well over 100,000. How one SaaS company, Spiffy, used Memberium to start their SaaS company, how multiple do. How Keap actually purchased another membership site and why they did it. The big killer to making courses that's going to really kill your courses. The question, does your membership empire exist in your head? You need to ask yourself that and how to fix that. The biggest step that people skip on the way to 1,000, the pricing sweet spot to provide value, and how should you start a course or should you start a membership first, and the simple shift to close the right people into your membership. All this on the Garlic Marketing Show, and we'll talk about how you can really deliver video case stories and collect them all throughout it using Memberium and other software. All this next on the Garlic Marketing Show. Let's get started.
My name is Gino Wickman. I was introduced to Ian, and that's what brought me into this video world and got me embracing this video world. And Ian did exactly what I hoped. He got me really comfortable with putting videos out to the world. And having a great strategy around putting videos out to the world, because there's so much more than just shooting a video. And so the way that he positions those videos, optimizes those videos, he's done a great job.
All right. I've known Micah for quite a long time, and and it's great to see Memberium. Our good friend Don Buck was talking about how well it integrates with software like Keap. It's a WordPress add-on, so you can get it into your website. You don't have to have another site. Obviously doing it for 10 years, you've learned a lot about it. You've seen a lot of people do the mistakes, and I want to talk about the 4 stages, but tell me a little bit more about Memberium and why it's so awesome.
Yeah, thanks. Memberium is a WordPress integration that works with either Keap or ActiveCampaign, which are both CRMs. And if somebody out there is not familiar, it's your customer database. So essentially, we are allowing WordPress, somebody's website, to access the information in their customer database so that it can do things like access control, membership control, who can see what page. But it goes beyond that into helping people manage their payment information. If they are an affiliate, they can log in and get affiliate resources and see affiliate stats. So it's kind of anything that you would want to put behind a login is the simple way that I look at it. But most people are doing memberships, courses, and communities and things like that.
Nice. And besides, we were talking before the show, what were some of the interesting ways that you're seeing people use Memberium that are beyond just a normal course?
Yeah, one that just popped into my head that I wasn't thinking of earlier is Spiffy, Go Spiffy, the software. They started in Memberium. So they used Memberium to protect their SaaS, their product. And essentially they were putting some functions into their WordPress site using Memberium to protect it. And effectively they had a SaaS. So I've seen that quite a bit where people will put, whether it's goal tracking functionality, journaling functionality, some sort of functionality behind a paywall and essentially create a little bit of a SaaS, not just a membership. But that one in particular is cool because that software we now use ourselves. They kind of made it and they started out with us.
That's so cool. That's really cool. You wouldn't think that a SaaS would be using a membership software, but it makes so much sense because that's in essence most SaaS is a membership site. That's a smart way to do it instead of going ground up, and getting your proof of concept out there. It's 10th anniversary. Obviously, the software works great. Integrating with ActiveCampaign, doing all those triggers, I think is super important because you need to be speaking to them in emails the best way. What are some of the successes, your favorite success stories that you've seen over 10 years? Because you have people that have been using it for 10 years, don't you?
We do, yeah. And one of my favorite success stories is we have a client in Australia who uses it to teach people how to sell on Amazon and things like that, to run an Amazon store. And he has a client. So my client's client, or in other words, his member, has already made over $1 million profit and bought himself a Tesla, but he's only 15. And
What?
Yeah, and so he's waiting to get his license to drive the Tesla that he bought with the money he made from following this guy's course. So empowering a course creator to in turn empower thousands of people, right? That kid's only one of the people. I think is really, to me was really eye opening. I knew they were helping people, but to hear that one's like, whoa, that kid's life is unbelievably different because he accessed this course.
That's so cool. That and that's great. I love seeing those. And that's something great for your user too, right? Because it's so inspiring. Because there's so many people that complain about their courses or don't use the courses, and so obviously there's that type of coaching. What are some of the unusual success stories that you've seen, like, or maybe like more traditional businesses using courses?
So I think Keap is a good example. Keap, the software company, they use our software to onboard all of their customers, partners, and employees. But the kind of interesting part of the story is somebody else built the course teaching Keap. They built that on our software, and then Keap bought the business from them. And so it was perfect because that, his name's Tyler, who had created the business in the first place. The business was worth so much to him as a normal solo business owner, teaching and consulting, but to the software company who bought it from him, it's worth way more, right? They now have a very structured, standardized training for all of their team. And you would think they might be able to create that in-house. In this case, the aftermarket did it better. And so they just scooped it up.
That's a really interesting way to think about it too, because there's so many of these. I know that I've used some of these softwares. I mean, I've used some of Keap's education, and I think when people are internal, they're not really power users of the software, right? So he was probably a power user and could teach people how to do it at a completely different level than Keap was, right?
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. And what are tell me, do you have like bricks and mortar companies, non-SaaS companies using the Memberium as well?
We do. So we have a lot of people will use it for basic account management. So think of like Spa, who has people's credit card numbers on file. They want to use something like Keap or Active Campaign to do their marketing. And then they use us to manage. The client logs in and now they can book an appointment. They can use their credits. They can buy more credits. Consultants do the same thing with it. So a little bit more traditional, meaning attorneys, doctors, anybody who wants to protect documents, basically saying, you upload me a document, I send a document back to you, logging history, logging calls. The reason I'm saying this is one of the features is you can automatically have a unique page created per contact. And so everything related to that contact, you just put on that page. No other contact will ever be able to see it, if that makes sense.
That makes a lot of sense. Yeah, because there's always that, where do you put everything and how do you keep it safe and making unique stuff. And also from an email marketing standpoint, like you said, making sure it's being emailed to the clients and regularly updated for the client. I love that. And, we got to do something like that with the tackle box. You've seen a lot of people try and grow courses, and I want to talk about the 4 stages of growing a course, but it was super interesting because we had, Mike and I were just in a mastermind together, and I was listening to a gentleman talk about building his course out, and man, it was just like, he was telling me all the things that he shouldn't do. I was like, oh man, don't do that. Oh, don't do that. Don't start there. And I think it's pretty common that people want to invest tons of money and time into courses, possibly even build ground up software before doing it. What are some of the big mistakes you see at that early stage of building your course?
Yeah, that gentleman was a perfect example of it, where they have this notion in their head of something they've seen someone else do. And they just think, oh, I'll just do that, but for my industry. So-and-so said he got, what was it, like 7-cent clicks off of YouTube. And if I convert X, so his math is based on all these assumptions. And that's the big killer, I think, because they over-engineer based on assumptions. And what I would suggest instead is to do the smallest version of whatever you can imagine first and just putting it out there, because you're going to learn so fast by trying to go run an ad or publish a thing than you are in your head. And I run into a surprising number of people where their membership empire lives in their head, and they're trying to perfect it before getting started, right? They're going around to groups and gathering input and data instead of starting it. And there's some not fun personal stories of people shooting themselves in the foot doing that, meaning like running out of budget by over engineering and then never getting started or never getting a customer. And it's like, no, you got to test, you got to start small.
Yeah. Yep. Starting small, getting it out there. So let's talk through those 4 stages, because I thought that was beautiful. You described it in a few minutes. And by the way, if you want to get in depth with these 4 stages, you can go to growyourmembershipnow.com and you can get a hold of this entire little course that I don't know how big the course is. I'm sorry. Entire course that Micah and his team has made. And 10 years, obviously they're doing something right. So Micah, tell me about the 4 stages of growing a course.
Yeah. So to try to put it really simply, it's a stage per digit of members. So if you're in the single digits of members or course sales per month, let's call it, if you're selling at one time, or the double digits is stage 2, triple digits, stage 3. And it basically means in stage 1, when you have less than 10 people, you need to focus on building. You're not really focused at this point on retention or upselling or a high level mastermind, all the ideas. At this stage, you're just trying to build something basic and get your first 10 people on it. So you might have to get those people by phone calls, personal interactions. Mm-hmm. However you get them, it's that you're in this kind of like bootstrapping startup-y stage. Even if you're big and have budget, I would say you still want to do this first part a little bit manually. And then once you're above 10, you switch to stage 2. So now you're into the double digits of members or sales per month. And at this point, it's the whole focus is selling. So once you get above 10, it's like, okay, there must be something here. Like, I was able to convince a few people. Now I need to focus on leveraged sales. In other words, maybe you're trying to speak or you're trying to do ads or you're getting on podcasts, you're trying SEO, whatever it happens to be. Now you're trying to go one to many with your sales to a degree to see if you can get it above 100, meaning does that phone conversation close that you did to get the person transferred to some sort of scale. And the purpose of this is if you can't sell it above 100, then it still might not be a good idea because it takes a lot of effort to build a course. And if you're going to build it for 15 people, maybe you shouldn't have built it. Not that it doesn't benefit them, but the time and energy invested, you could have delivered personally services to those 15 people and done a better job perhaps than building a course. So it's economies of scale. So basically you go into sales mode until you're over 100. And this is one of the big mistakes that people try to skip this. They try to move ahead and say, oh, I got a few people. Let me now overinvest in the business now that it's proven. It's like, well, it's not really proven. You got to focus on sales. And sometimes content creators can be such experts and intellectuals. They don't want to focus on sales. They want to focus on perfecting their craft of content creation to attract the sales. But what I try to tell them is, hey, if you install a sales system in phase 2, the sales phase, then you can turn away and go work on your course while that sales system runs. So you got to get a sales system in place in phase 2. And then in phase 3, if you get above 100 members, you get into the triple digits. Now you're focused on retention. So you're saying, okay, I built something, I have people coming into it. How do I keep the people? So if it's turning a course into a membership by adding calls, or if it was a membership initially, adding better onboarding, adding community, adding gamification, adding certification, right? Whatever is going to make it stickier. You do all that in phase 3. And most people, they want to do that stuff. That's kind of the fun stuff. It's gratifying to do the phase 3 stuff, but don't skip phase 2, right? You sell, then you retain. And then in phase 4, once you're out of the triple digits into the quadruple, meaning you have about 1,000 people, then you focused on ascension. And that just means creating higher level products and programs. And part of the logic here is that if you start a mastermind and you have 1,000 paying customers, even 1% of them is 10 people to go into your mastermind. So now that I've given like that specific math, I will say that this totally depends on the industry, the price point, right? It doesn't have to be 100, 1,000, whatever, but it's more saying, what are the milestones to say, okay, I'm out of the building phase. I need to focus on selling. I'm out of the selling phase. I need to focus on retention. I'm out of retention. I need to focus on ascension. And if you do that correctly, the people who do it correctly, they build something, they start sending people into it, they keep those people, they raise the price of those people. And now everybody coming in that front door, almost a conveyor belt of people, is now maximized. And then you can go through and now build your empire, now whatever, right? But initially that's kind of what I explain to people to try to help them understand, do you have over 100 sales? No, you don't. Okay, you're here. And it's a little blunt, but it brings them down to earth,
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's funny when we're talking about that, the one guy that was in the mastermind, we're like, hey, pick up the phone and sell this, because he was talking about ads. And I think that's where everyone goes to. It's like, I'm going to build this huge course. And Dobbin, who's been on the show a few times, great podcast, who helps, build out these funnels all the time for people, was saying that a lot. So many people go into this massive engineering, and instead of going, hey, I've got this idea, let me sell it to 10 people, or let me get it to 100 people and sell it there. And so you mentioned the skipping part, right? And skipping the sales part and skipping, past, sales to 100. Besides that, what are some of the early on, how big should that first course be then? If you're only doing it for 10 people, what's the best way, the fastest way to create it while still creating something of value?
Yeah, I think there's a couple ways to think about this, depending on the content you have, the market or whatever, but I'm going to go with an oversimplified thing and say price. So if you create a course that's about $297, and I talked to one of the partners at Mind Valley, was in a mastermind with me, and I was kind of saying, well, I want to release my course for $97 because I want it to go wide. I want to get as many people as possible. And he's like, we've tried all sorts of things. Like if $97, they don't respect it. You know what I mean? They don't think it's a real course, basically. $297 is kind of a sweet spot to say, okay, they're going to think this is a real course that you put time and energy and effort into. So you could think that in your head, like, what would people pay? What could I deliver to people that's worth way more than $297? And hopefully that's easy. Hopefully that doesn't mean you're creating 10 hours of content. Hopefully 2-3 hours, maybe at most. That might even be high, because when you snip that down into little 3 to 7 minute chunks, that's quite a bit of lessons and topics, and so I'm looking at a couple hours, couple $100. You could definitely start smaller, but that's kind of like a core thing. And if that's within your reach, do it. If not, the other way to do this is to create, little $7 kind of tool mini course, or $47 tool mini course. Both are fine. The $7 way is not bad at all. But again, there's a little bit of psychology in there where if somebody's coming around and you're offering them something for $7, they're like, it's one of those marketing things. I'm not sure I want to do that. So that's a ballpark, kind of on where to start there.
No, I mean, and it's one of those things you can play around with, right? And, I kind of, and I realized as we were talking at the very beginning, I was interchanging courses and membership. Now, obviously, it's two different things. Which do you feel it's better? Because you mentioned the $297 course. Is it better to start with membership or start with course? Which do you see working more?
I think it's better to start with a course. A lot of businesses are adding these things, courses or memberships, as a supplement to their existing business. So there are definitely exceptions. Like if your customers are already paying some sort of monthly fee, they're on some sort of subscription for something, then membership would be the way to go, right? You offer an additional level of membership and boost their price or whatever. If not, though, a course is a better way to start. And it's also a lot less commitment, because even if you go and you make a course and you spend the time and energy and money and you get 3 people, that's actually better to say, okay, that was kind of a failure, whatever, I'm going to move on and make a different course. If you get 3 people in a membership, the problem is you've committed to supplying whatever to get those members, and now you have to supply it, but only for 3. So it's almost worse to undersell a membership, because typically you're saying it's worth it for me to do, a call a week on this and a call a month on that, and, one-on-ones, and produce a piece of content a month, and whatever you're going to put into, let's say, this monthly delivery machine. You only get 3 people. You're still on the hook for that junk unless you want to cancel those people. So a course is definitely a safer way to start and test. The natural progression for a lot of people is they build a course, and there's other maybe items before this, like a book or something. But let's say they build a course, they start getting people. Once it gains a little traction, then they add a community, and then they probably will add a monthly fee along with the community. and will say, hey, I'm going to do Q&A once a month, or I'm going to jump on and hot seat a few people once a month or whatever. So that's kind of a natural thing. What I would say is optimal that I'm seeing more and more is people give a small amount of each thing. Like they used to say, you get a call a week, or you get all this content or whatever. Now it's like, okay, you might need a 15-minute call a month, plus access to a Q&A, plus access to a Facebook group. It doesn't have to be too fancy, right? That way the person has multiple ways to get a hold of you. As long as they're making progress once a month on their goal, they'll likely keep paying if it's a fair price to value, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. I mean, I think that's great. I mean, and it seems simple, but I think a lot of people, if you haven't built a course, if you haven't built a membership site, it's a lot of work, right? And starting this simple way and testing out everything Micah said, it will save you so much heartache. I know I was in there and I was listening to this guy, and I was listening to all the advice this guy was getting from essentially, complimentary mastermind from Keap and Dobbin hosting it. And I'm like, man, this would have saved me literally hundreds of thousands of dollars if I'd have been in this, 10 years ago. It's like, I look at all the courses I built and all things that, like you said, over engineering it, over promising, I made all those mistakes. Because back in the day, it was Udemy was like the first one out there, and they're like, sure, build these huge courses. We're not going to help you promote it. And now, everyone's going to ask, and, I think through 100 is concentrating on selling. What do you feel is the best way to, once to really accelerate through those 50 to 100 to, 250? What are you seeing as the best ways to really selling into a membership?
Something that I heard recently, but when I heard it, I was like, I wish I would have known that for a long time, because it's so simple and so good. One of my mentors said, it's easy to sell an individual into a group, but it's hard to sell to a group of individuals. And what he meant was, like, speaking from the stage to a group of individuals, trying to cover all of their nuanced questions is difficult, right? Whereas if you get the person one-on-one and you're selling them into a group, it's so easy.
Yep.
And so getting people, let's say, into a webinar, an intensive, some sort of content, let's say on Zoom, and then taking them into a breakout room to answer their questions, but also to offer them whatever is next, is pretty crazy effective. I've been seeing that where instead of like, hey, I'm going to pitch to the group, it's like, hey, you're all here for content. Individually, we go do Q&A, but it involves okay, where are you at? What do you need? Blah, blah, blah. And it's a whole different energy and conversation, right? The power dynamic, in fact, completely shifts from the users sitting there watching the speaker, they're anonymous, whatever, to the speakers looking right at them, talking to them, right? Answering their questions first before they pitch. It's not just a pitch. They do answer the questions, and they do make sure the person got value, right? And what's cool about that then is they know what level to pitch, because if the person, let's say they didn't get value, you don't have to pitch. Let's say they got great value and they're a good candidate for your high level program. You can say, hey, this isn't something that I would bring up to every person, but you seem to qualify for this higher level. It might actually be better for you than this other level. So you can kind of, it's like you can scale the people into most of the presentation, but then you can individualize the pitch section. That I've seen do really well. And so, that assumes that you can get people onto a call and whatnot. There's other models, but that one I like.
I love that. And I think that especially early on, it gives you such awesome feedback. You can record this, and now you've got actually more content, right? You've got your FAQs, you're understanding their language. And I mean, it's kind of like what we do with case stories, right? So I tell them, like, we were mentioning before, because you're doing case stories now in your 10th anniversary, which is awesome. You're going to go out there and having a conversation with someone, right? It's a different dynamic, like you said, than simply putting content or putting a list of questions in there and getting their feedback. I think that's a fantastic way to do this. So let's talk a little bit about just getting started with Memberium and integrating it, why it's so important that it integrates with ActiveCampaign and Keap, because I think a lot of people might miss this nuance too, that integration is so critical.
Yeah, so we are different in terms of most membership software. Most of them are trying to be a membership system, and then if you want, you can send people in from your database, is kind of how they think about it. And therefore they connect to like, 50, 100 different things at a very light level, kind of a basic level. They're allowing you to insert members. The difference that we are going for is Keap and ActiveCampaign are both automation systems. They're some of the more advanced automation you can get for a small business at least. And we want all of that automation that's in those systems to be available in the website. And that means the same decision logic and timers and all of those things that you can do in any of these systems that can now be reflected in the membership site. So member comes in, let's say for the first 3 days, it doesn't offer them any upsell. But once the timer goes off in the CRM to say, hey, they've been in here 3 days, or they've clicked 3 emails or whatever, right? They're hot. Then the next time they log into the membership system, it's like, hey, you're on a streak. You've logged in a bunch of times. Here's this special offer to jump a grade or whatever, right? It's the fact that these CRM systems, they're managing the contact in an ongoing way. They know everything they're doing and buying and interacting with. And so if the site knows the same thing, it can customize the experience to reflect not just, what's next to buy, but it can also create an amazing customer experience. It can acknowledge what they're doing, send them to the correct resource, be intuitive. And that's why it's so important. In our software, we built one version just for Keap. So it's 100% just for Keap, and a totally separate version just for ActiveCampaign. So it's not generic in any way. It's a complete slave to the CRM, to the customer database.
I love that. And, just on a side note too, people always ask me when the best time to ask for case stories is. And like when they hit certain milestones, right? And I always say that. So when you have the milestones in there, you can put that automation to ask for the case story in ActiveCampaign. We've got those emails and stuff. You go to videocasestory.com or, just message me under here, comments, and I'll send you some of those emails. But messaging them and collecting case stories along the way, because then you can also use that's what I tell people all the time. It's like the best way to keep people is show them other people doing the same thing, right? And keep marketing to them, because you need to keep, like you were saying, in retention, right? You have to keep marketing to these people, don't you?
Oh, yeah. Yeah. It was so fortunate that I ran into you again, because we've known each other a while, but we haven't talked in depth about these case stories that you're such an expert at. It's fortunate for us because we've just found almost accidentally that they are so effective. We have people telling us, hey, I want to do what so-and-so did a lot. I want to do what I saw in this video. That's common. And they'll tell us that's why I got the software, because I wanted to do that thing. So you're totally right. So cool.
Yeah. And also because the thing that they think they want to do, especially if you're in a membership, right? It evolves. It evolves, because you get to that first step in any type of advancement, whether you're an agency like being coached and you get to like the first 250,000. Now you're like, oh, there's someone going to 500,000. What do they need to do? And same thing, like membership site. I'm sure like, oh, this is getting me to my first 100. Oh, here's someone that went from 100 to 1,000 and what they did, and showing that separate, different story. I think it's so cool that you can deliver this now. That's what I love about these types of integrations. If you get case stories, you can now have Memberium tell Keap or ActiveCampaign, hey, now it's time to send them this case story, right? It's just amazing, all the power of this. My problem is I get so excited. I'm like, I want to do all the stuff, over-engineer it, like you said. But Micah, thank you so much for being on the Garlic Marketing Show. And thank you all for taking Micah and I on your journey. This has been Iron Garlic and the Garlic Marketing Show.